Okay, here's the thing. So my friends are doing an NFL fantasy football draft. Everyone is getting together to do their draft picks, and it's formal attire. So I have to make a dress. I just have to make a sparkly dress. So we're headed to Hobby Lobby right now to look at fabric for my dress. I wanted it to be sparkly and stretchy, and this was pretty much all they had, so that's what I got. Okay, I'm back from Hobby Lobby. This is what I wound up buying. Of the like sequinedy, flashy fabric that was stretchy, they had like this and black, and that was like it. And I kind of was like, maybe I'll do black, but then I was like, no, we're going all out. I'm going for gold. I'm also gonna have to line this completely because it is a little bit see-through and we can't have that. But I'm about to go out of town in a couple of hours, so I cannot start working on this now because I'm fixing to pack, get myself ready. And then Dustin and I drove down to South Louisiana for a worship night. We stayed at a friend's house. Those are his little feetsies. We got to tour their church. It was really cool. This is the kids area. I loved it. And they had a glow-in-the-dark wall, which I thought was amazing. I got to see my friend's little baby. And that's us at the worship night. That's me with Olivia and Nathaniel. Bless me. And that sneeze yeeted me all the way back to Ruston, where I cut out my first bodice mock-up. Okay, I just tried my first mock-up on, and it did not fit. Okay, these are my new pattern pieces, except for that needs to come to about like there. Okay, so I'm just tracing my pattern pieces here, very loosely, as you can see. And then I cut them out. And then I folded up my lining fabric, except this is not the fabric I wound up using. This was just kind of a practice. And, oh, this is where I realized my fabric wasn't long enough. So here's the deal. In order to do ruching, your dress has to be long enough that you can gather it up in the middle a whole lot and it still be long enough to reach the floor. That is not the case, but what I'm hoping to be able to do is, because I'm using such a narrow portion, because it stretches, I'm hoping that I can just use up half the fabric that I have to cut the strip, and I will just sew like another section. I'll just cut another piece of it there and sew onto the bottom to have enough for the ruching.
I don't really know if this is going to work. I definitely have a problem. But I'm choosing to ignore my problem and keep going.
Alright, so I folded my sequin fabric in half, and then my lining fabric also in half, and laid that on top of the sequin fabric, cut around it. That's just me making the arm hole a little bit lower so it's comfortable, and then I folded the sequin fabric again and laid what I just cut out on top of it to make the back so they would be the same.
I just want to find the middle of the fabric because basically, no. Okay, so I'm folding this in half. Basically what I'm going to do is lay down my back piece on here, and I'm going to cut my back piece, and then I'm going to go back.
And then to make my lining exactly like my outer fabric, I just laid my fabric on top of my lining fabric, which I had folded in half. So that gives me a back and a front that are exactly the same. And I just wound up later altering the neckline of the front to be a little bit lower so that it would match the front fabric. And then I pinned right sides together and sewed. Now, obviously, the lining fabric does not have a right side, so that didn't matter. And that's the front and that's the back all sewed together. You flip it out and it looks like...
Come in. What time? Just remembered we gotta understitch, so flip it back.
Understitching is just the process of sewing down the seam allowance inside the lining. It just keeps the lining from popping out once you've turned it right sides out. But if you don't understand it by that explanation, you probably won't. Just Google understitching tutorial. Then I clipped into the seam allowance in the V so that it would lay flat when I turned it out. I drank some Go Juice and then did exactly the same steps for the back of the dress. I laid my lining onto my outer fabric, right sides together, pinned it, and then sewed it all up. This is me unpicking the shoulder seam because I should not have sewed that together. Don't sew that yet.
So I had this idea last night while I was trying to go to sleep that what if I were to take the mesh portion of the bottom of the fabric and use it When I attach my bottom skirt portion, I attached that to the...
Yeah, you'll see what I'm talking about later. Then I had to trim down my gold fabric from my front piece that I had already done because for some reason that one didn't match my lining even though the back was perfect. Okay, then I pinned my lining to my fabric, but I could have just waited and done that later when I laid my front and back pieces together, so that was kind of pointless. You can skip that step. I laid out my front and back, and oh no, look at that. They're not right sides together, idiot. But you know what? That girl is going to pin them together anyway. She sure is. So this is me pinning my front and back together. What I thought was right sides together. It wasn't. Oh, look at that. You're just now figuring it out? Good job. So I fixed it, put them actually right sides together, and sewed. And now we can try it on. I love it. Okay, so what you want to do for this part is you just want to pull the dress up and create all your little ruches till you are happy with the amount of ruched that it is. My elastic's gonna start right about there. Then you're gonna measure to where your elastic ends, which is right about there. And you're gonna cut that joker. I had to cut a thick piece of elastic in half because I didn't have skinny elastic, but it worked fine. And then I trimmed down the seam allowance so the gold parts wouldn't scrape me on the inside. So what you're about to see is the right way to do this, but I brain farted and thought I was doing it wrong, so I'm gonna actually rip out everything that I'm doing here, and I tried to gather it, which was dumb. I think that worked. Spoiler alert, it didn't. And this is me realizing that actually I had done it right before and I just needed to go back and put the elastic in. I'm so stupid. The dress doesn't have to stretch. The dress isn't supposed to stretch. Only the elastic stretches. So the way this technique is supposed to work is when you sew the elastic, if you stretch it as you sew it, then when the elastic snaps back into place, it will actually gather the dress up with it, and that is what creates the ruching effect. But I just got confused and was trying to stretch the dress as I sewed, not the elastic, which makes no sense at all, but I was in a hurry and just wasn't thinking, and so it worked out. I just had to go back and put the elastic in, and I stretched the snot out of that elastic as I was sewing it in order to get the desired ruching effect. I put my machine on a zigzag stitch and I used my lining fabric seam allowance to cover over the elastic as I sewed so that the elastic would be encased in the seam. So then I folded the remainder of my fabric in half and cut along the bottom, and then I moved them and sewed them along the side to make it wider instead of longer, and that's what I used for the bottom. Then I gathered up the mesh section of the bottom of the dress so that it would be the same length as the hem of my dress, and you can see I put a stabilizer in there, which is good when you're sewing with mesh fabric, but I should have done it later because the stabilizer doesn't gather very well. So what I should have done and what I wound up doing is cutting that off and going back and sewing gathering stitches with just the mesh, and then when I sewed the bottom to the bottom of the dress, I put the stabilizer back in, and that just helps the mesh fabric sew onto the other fabric without moving around so much or stretching or tearing because mesh is such a fragile fabric. And after sewing that right sides together and understitching again, the dress was pretty much done. I just had to hem it, and because this fabric doesn't fray, I didn't even sew it, I just cut it. I wound up cutting it a little shorter in the front and longer in the back, just like a mullet, and I made sure to put my high heels on before I did this so that I knew it would still reach the floor while I was wearing my shoes. Oh, hello. Next in fashion? No, sorry, I don't think I'll be available for your next season. Thanks, though. Did you have fun tonight, Katie? Did you learn anything about football tonight?
No.
Summer, did you have a good time tonight?
Yes.
Did you learn anything about football?
No.
Elizabeth, did you have fun tonight? Did you learn anything new about football?
I know it all already.
Exactly. So overall, I was so happy with how the dress turned out, and the party was amazing. We had a great time. And if you're thinking about making a dress like this and you've never done it before, just go for it. It was so much fun, and every time I made a mistake, I really did learn something new. Well, I hope that y'all enjoyed making me watching me make this dress. So if you want to see more videos like this, then let me know. Till then, see ya.
Hey, fun stuff right there.
Silly little puppy. Oh, okay. Where'd you go? Okay.